gave them up. But Smith never managed to free her father. He kept the silver for himself. Another time, he found a woman by the name of Katie Onderdonk, who hailed from what's now Rockland County. And unfortunately for them, they were broken off from Orange County in 1798. But this Katie Onderdonk, she fell into the sway of Claudius Smith. She was rather in awe of him, and he took that as well, a kind of honor. And he said, I can tell from the look in your eye, Katie, you're going to want to be with me. Oh, I've got a fine place in Smith's Clove where we can dine. And she said, ah. And then her brother, seeing, stood up and said, oh, well, Mr. Smith, our sister'd prefer to stay with us. I hope you can accept that. Ha ha, you've had her enough. I want her now. And he grabbed the young woman, threw her over his shoulder, put her on his horse, and rode into the Ramapos and went up into a kind of crevice, maybe the size of this room, where you could have horses and you could camp and stay dry in the rain. And there he kept the young woman until, by some accounts, she managed to run away in the middle of the night when Smith had a little too much rum and was unaware of his escaping almost princess. That was Claudius Smith. But hey, hang on, it gets even worse. A fellow by the name of Armstrong had a penchant for, well, going and fighting for liberty and independence. And he would stay at his house when there was no need to be in battle. And Smith became aware. He went over to this stronghold, and he went out, and his men had surrounded the place. He began to cry, who's in there? Armstrong, are you really strong? Why don't you come out and fight the likes of me? I'm only 7 feet tall. Ha 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 ha! Well, Mrs. Armstrong said, husband, don't take the bait. Please, just get your gun be ready. He's going to likely burst into here. I'm going to burst out there. I don't want him tainting up our house with his nasty, stinking presence. Fie upon that rascal. Husband, husband, I pray thee. But Armstrong was in a rage, and he cried out, jump up and bite, see what you'll hang on to. And then he went and kitchaklunk, opened up the latch of the door, ready to engage in a manly round of fisticuffs. But Smith, even though he was of a superior size and strength, blam! Shot the fellow unarmed. And then on he goes to the homestead of a fellow by the name of Abimael Youngs, a fellow who had quite a small fortune, tucked away in a rather miserly way. Well, Smith came in, and as was his usual practice, he throws a rope around the neck of Abimael Youngs, and then he begins to hoist it up. Well, friend, if you like, you can spit out where you're hiding the silver and gold. You know I'm gonna have to get it. The fellow began to go kind of blue in the face, and it looked as though he'd rather be strangled to death. And, well, Smith appreciated, or at least had some respect for that. He let go of the rope, and when the fellow fell, 'twas said he knocked open a floorboard, and there Smith found the fortune he sought. He scooped up and took, many pieces of silver and gold, along with important documents, the land deed, marriage certificate, etc., of Abimael Youngs. And off he rode, ha 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 ha, giving that wild laugh all the way back to his hiding place at Smith's Cove in the Ramapos. And then 52 people petitioned Governor George Clinton of New York. He was also the commander of the New York militia, and he lived in Orange County, and he knew of Smith. He was a little bit afraid at first to post a wanted poster around and about. He feared revenge, but he knew he had to do something. So we put up a poster with a little sketch of Smith describing him as a fierce fighter. And a reward would be given of £1,200 sterling, maybe 50,000 there, I would say, in today's money. But everyone was afraid to go and try to apprehend Smith. But Smith was a little bit fearful, and he thought that perhaps he should take heed of some of his brother's advices, and he would leave the command of the cowboys to a fellow by the name of John Mason and others. And he went back to his ancestral land of Smithtown, way out on the middle of Long Island. And there he went about, well, doing what he always did, drinking, carousing, harassing, bragging, till finally, after he had had too much to drink, he passed out in his mother's old home. Unbeknownst to him were 3 men bold enough to go out. They wanted that reward, and they wanted to apprehend the scourge of the Ramapos. They found Smith stone ossifyingly drunk, and they put a rope around him, got him on a horse, and brought him all the way from Long Island back to Orange County, to Goshen. And there, in January of 1779, a trial was held, and Smith was convicted of thievery, of harassment, of murder. And he was to face the gallows. But hey, what a spectacle! He appears on the gallows, clad in fine white buckskin with silver buckles. And he stands, and they had to raise up the noose because he was so tall. There was a cart on which he perched. He looked out and leered at the crowd. Hundreds had come. Ha 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 ha! Look at all of you gawking and gaping at me. I know what you're thinking. Oh, he's going to hang. Life's over. But the life I had, why, it measures up to the life of all of yous. I've had many adventures, more than you could ever count upon, you poor pathetic farmers. Ha 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 ha! I go out laughing! And all thought he was, well, making a mockery of them and his fate and even the devil. And then one fellow stepped forward to confront Claudius Smith, Abimael Young's. Listen, Mr. Smith, before you give up the ghost, we have a certain matter to attend to. I pray you have on your person the land deeds you stole from me. You don't need them now. Give them back, give them back. Oh, ho, ho, give them back, says he. Well, I'd like to give them back, but you can see I have an appointment with a certain executioner over there. Why, tell you what, Mr. Youngs, after he's finished with his business, I'll meet you where we're both going. And then we can settle our score. Then, at length, the order was given, and the executioner hit the haunches of the horse that pulled out the cart from beneath the noose-wearing Smith. But just before he gave up the ghost, shunk, shunk, he kicked off his boots. There, I'm not dying like a trooper with my boots. He gave up the ghost. The body got buried, but didn't remain under the ground for long. For 'twas said, and backed up by evidence, that after a time when a courthouse was being constructed, round and about, I believe, the early 18-teens or 1820, the skull of Claudius Smith was exhumed and brought and placed into the mortar work of that courthouse to show why this courthouse is built on the ends of those who opposed our liberty and our independence. The skull set inside the walls is said from time to time, even in these times, to call out with that maniacal laugh. So do be careful when you pass by. It's kind of out of use now, but the ghost of Claudius Smith still haunts us. But no, how folk around here put an end to that fellow's reign of terror, helping to bring about liberty and independence we still enjoy today. Thank you for listening to the tale of Claudius Smith, Earl of the Ramparts. The Battle of the Hudson Highlands proved one thing, that the Americans, though a tenacious force, why, needed a little bit more in terms of, weaponry, something more on the line of fortifications. Oh yes, they had fortifications set by the likes of Rufus Putnam and Thaddeus Kosciuszko and Thomas Machen, where one redoubt at West Point guarded another and guarded another, so there were a total of 37, all watching over that key to the revolution. Yes, the revolution. Know this, John Adams, George Washington, and General John Burgoyne couldn't be more disparate, but they agreed on one thing. The Hudson River was the key to the American Revolution. Whoever controlled our river controlled communications, supplying, movement of troops. And where was the lock? Right here in Orange County, in our Hudson Highlands. And thus, one of the first acts by the Continental Congress was to invest the meager treasury it had into fortifying the lands around here, not in New Jersey or Pennsylvania, Virginia, but here in New York. And that meant the iron mines had to go to work. From Greenwood to Sterling, they began to forge huge iron links from metal scratched out of the high hills from around here. And it took brave men at night who knew the farms better than anyone else to move those links under cover of the night, so the likes of Claudius Smith or the Redcoats wouldn't find out. They dragged those chains, and the first one got set just before the Battle of the Hudson Highlands in October 1777, across from Anthony's Nose to Bear Mountain. But there, the tide proved wicked and fierce. The Hudson, of course, is tidal. It goes up and down. Why, some even had the notion that rather than putting up a chain, why don't we just fill the channel between Bear Mountain and Anthony's Nose with stones? And General Israel Putnam began to knock stones into the water until eventually they realized, whoever thought of that idea, filling up the Hudson, is rather a doodle. You know who it was? The man who became the first Chief Justice of the United States, John Jay. Well, he didn't realize the depths of the Hudson River. At that time, people thought that the Hudson off of West Point and World's End had no bottom. Well, that very first chain stretched across the Hudson, it got cut by the British Royal Navy. And General Sir Henry Clinton, a cousin to George, declared that was the Yankee pumpkin vine. Well, at the Battle of the Hudson Highlands, the Redcoats landed a little south of Peekskill, causing General Israel Putnam to believe that the attack would be on the east side of the river, and he called for George Clinton to bring the militia to help. And they did it, not by riding around on a horse saying, "The regulars are coming," like Paul Revere did. They set fires, and they sent a message. Why, they could send a message from New York City to Albany with those bonfires in just 20 minutes. And the bonfires flickered on some of the high hills round and about here. And Men and women left farm and family behind to go and fight. The women would serve as camp followers, and the men would do whatever they could with their muskets. Well, they mustered round, but meanwhile, led by a fellow who was from what's now Putnam County, but then it was Dutchess County, named Beverly Robinson, a loyalist, he led a feint. He had often gone hunting across the river in our Orange County. And so he led the redcoats through a dense, wild wilderness, said by some to be inhabited by supernatural creatures, ghosts and goblins of various kinds. And even with that, Washington had urged some fortification, but Dunderberg, the Timp, Pinjip, all places which talk about storminess of these places, they were left unguarded. The redcoats then were able to sneak round through the wilds of Orange County and come upon, near Popaloppin Creek, Forts Clinton and Fort Montgomery. Ah, Fort Montgomery, named after the heroic General Montgomery, who gave up his life in Montreal, hoping to bring the Canadians into this fray. But now, his fort would fall. It was really just a redoubt with armed abattements facing the river. But when the chain was cut and the cannons from the British ships began to fire, the Americans could only kind of duck down, and then the redcoats came up behind them. Now, one account described another future justice for the Supreme Court, Brockhulst Livingston, turned round and he saw the redcoats with a flag of truce. Well, he steps out to greet them, a young 22-year-old, a lieutenant colonel, and he's greeted by a Scottish officer in the Black Guard, but he had the name of Mungo Campbell. Some said he changed his name to Mungo just for the fight, but I think his name really was Mungo, and he says, "Sir, surrender your rebels, and you'll be treated with the courtesy and respect you can expect from His Majesty King George III. Oh, you mean a king who has no respect for our legislative bodies, our judges, our homes, where your men can come marauding into the houses with no apologies and no even possibility of being punished? No, no, we will not accept your terms. The king's mercy we scorn." And that angered Mungo Campbell.